Every server maintains a log file, but they may have different names and be in different places. I'll show you the default setup for Tomcat, but you could be using a different server, or you could have Tomcat configured differently. Tomcat tells you where the log file is when it starts. Here it says that it's starting domain 1, which is the default domain name for the default server from J2EE, and it specifies where the log file is being placed and what the log file is being named. You can delete the log file at any time because it will be created again when the server starts running. If you leave the log file intact, any new entries are simply appended to the end of it. The log file now contains the information written to it by the server starting. You can add your own information to the log file from a servlet and from a JSP page. This is a Java server page that writes entries into the log. There are two methods that write to the log. This first method writes the string that you specify into the log file. It has some other information that goes with it, and I'll show you that in just a minute, but all you're required to specify is one single character string. The next thing that happens in this page is the creation of an IO exception object. It isn't thrown from here, but it is logged. This call to the log method requires both a character string and the throwable object, and this will make another log entry. Now you'll probably never need to log an exception because if you throw it, it automatically becomes logged at that point. So the first form of the log method call is probably the only one that you'll ever need. Now here's what happens when you display this page. There, the page has displayed, which means that two calls to the log method have been executed. Again, let me point out that your server could store your logs in another place and under an entirely different name. The log file is most useful as a debugging tool to figure out what happened after something went wrong. If you log enough information, you can follow the tracks of a user to figure out what he did, usually to figure out how he managed to crash something. Anyway, here's the log file. The log file begins with the oldest entries. You can see the entries here that were made by this server while it was starting up, and there are a lot more entries to see. This last entry is the one that was made by the JSP page. This is the bottom of the traceback. Here is where that entry begins. The traceback is quite long because it's the stack trace of all the methods in the server and in the container that got the page into this state. And here is the simple logging line that did not include a throwable. It doesn't have the traceback. And that's all there is to logging. Oh, you might want to run the make error JSP from the previous lesson and then look at the log file. You'll find that the exception that it throws is automatically logged, traceback and all.